It's up on screen. We would hear now from Te Whata Ora, Auckland Regional Public Health Service on transport as a public health issue. I move that that takes precedence over the Waitemata crossing. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A discussion, I'll put it. All those in favour say aye. To the contrary say no. That is carried. I should foreshadow at the completion of this presentation, it's my intention to take a short break for lunch. So if you have other matters you need to attend to at the conclusion of this, we'll break. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Michael Hale toku ingoa. I'm a public health doctor from the local regional public health service, and a pleasure to be with you with the team today to talk about an issue that I think is real common across both the health and local government sectors, and that's transport, with the view to seeing how we could work closer together and work the slide shifter. Here we are. So a very brief, public health medicine, which is the specialty that I'm part of, is the part of medicine that doesn't deal with the sick, but tries to prevent sickness. And that's through all the things that lie in front of the health system. So our clean air, drinking water, education systems, opportunity to work, that's where we're focused on, because that's where approximately 80% of all things that contribute to health lie. And just briefly introducing the team, we're going to talk about 3 different topics. I'm very fortunate today to have, we have world experts from Tamaki Makaurau. So today we have Professor Alistair Woodward, whose expertise as a public health doctor and epidemiologist lie in air quality and health and climate change and health. We have Mr. James Hamill, who's a Starship paediatrician, to talk to us about, Starship paediatric surgeon and in the trauma service. He's going to talk to us about safety and health. Professor Melody Smith, who is an expert in physical activity and well-being, particularly around active trips to school, and I'll be summing up at the end. So I'll hand over now to Alistair to talk about transport and equality.
Right. Thank you very much. We are speaking in front of your lunch, so we need to be brief. I'm going to really just talk to 2 slides, which I think have got the nub of what I want to say to you, and I hope that there'll be a time for questions if you've got things you would like to find out more about. I was very interested to hear earlier on Councillor Darby talking about the importance of evidence in terms of local government decision making, and I hope that what we can offer you here is helpful evidence that might support you making decisions about transport, which are very difficult and fraught, I know. These are the 5 points about air pollution I want to make, that we've greatly underestimated in New Zealand the importance of air pollution in terms of a cause of poor health. We've also misunderstood or not understood that transport plays a very large part in that. There are particular elements or categories of the vehicle fleet that are particularly important, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But on the positive side, there are certainly opportunities for hitting the sweet spot, we believe, in terms of transport policy, ways in which the air pollution burden of disease can be reduced, and at the same time other gains can be made. Now, they might seem to you like big claims and rather surprising ones, perhaps. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the basis for these statements, which is, a study that was published 18 months ago, the Health and Air Pollution in New Zealand study. It was funded by a consortium of government departments. And it was a stock take, really, about the effects of air pollution in New Zealand, and the results were surprising. This is an infographic. You can find, if you go to the Health and Air Pollution in New Zealand website, more information. But just have a look at the top right-hand corner of the graph, which is an estimate of what was really the major outcome from the study, which was looking at mortality. And the effects of air pollution, two particular components of air pollution, fine particles and NO2, nitrogen dioxide, are shown there with the orange column and the blue column. Now they add up to about 3,300 deaths each year in New Zealand that we believe are caused by air pollution, by those two components. That is 2/3 the total number of deaths caused by smoking. It is roughly 10 times the road toll. It's a very large number. We also attempted to estimate the effects of air pollution on hospital admissions and on the prevalence of asthma. Now, we had very clever economists who worked with us to try and put dollars and cents on those health outcomes, and that's the social cost of air pollution, which is about $15 billion a year. The bottom part of the graph makes the point that we have been improving air quality, at least in regard to fine particles, but the effects of NO2 have in fact been increasing over time. And that's important for you because NO2 is essentially a transport pollutant. It's in New Zealand, its source is the vehicle fleet, and in particular diesel vehicles, which produce much more in the way of NO2 than do petrol vehicles. So I will skip through the next two slides, happy to talk about them, but just want to come back to these 5 major points I want to put before you. That air pollution is a big problem in New Zealand, about 3,300 excess deaths a year. Transport's responsible for roughly 2/3 of that health burden. There are vehicles in the fleet, large diesel vehicles that are 6 to 7 times more important in terms of that social cost. And there are solutions in our grasp. And I hope that we will have good time to talk about how to respond. That's something that I know that Michael is going to lead us through. I'll stop there and pass over to James.
Kia ora koutou, ko James Hill. So I'm here to talk to you about traffic safety, and in researching this I was looking through some old photos, and here's one from the 1920s. If you look carefully, there's a little girl, I think, and her mum crossing the street full of cars 100 years ago, and it made me wonder if anything much has changed in our approach to streets in the last 100 years. With any issue, no matter how technical, like road injury, it's always good to start with a good model. Here's a number of models, like Sustainable Development Goal model here, planetary health, taking into account the ecological overshoots. I just wanted to point out to you, though, the time course in this model from childhood through to adulthood, and the idea of taking an intergenerational viewpoint, and then the process involved in what leads to ill health or injury or even wellness, including accountability and agency, which is what we're here for today, and embodiment, which is what I do every day. Embodiment in road trauma normally means being hit by a car or a truck, and what we're seeing more and more of is kids being hit by urban light trucks, or SUVs if you like, and these are the sort of things we see in general: cracked skulls, big bleeding into the brain, broken bones all over the place, broken ribs. Usually these are multiple injuries with the little kids being hit. As you can imagine, it's like being hit by a brick wall. And how do the injuries occur? Well, it's a matter of energy. Some of you will remember from high school physics this formula where energy is related to the square of the velocity, which leads to this kind of exponential increase in death rates as you get hit by a vehicle from about 30 k's upwards. Note that 40 k's you get like 3 or 4 times the death rate compared to 30, and it also influences the ability to stop in time and prevented injury in the first place. So what's the data around the Auckland region? This map shows pedestrian and cycle crashes, the serious and the fatal ones. 57 pedestrians and 15 cyclists have lost their lives on Auckland streets over the last few years. And then we have good data from the Northern Regional Trauma Network, showing that 15% of all major trauma hospital admissions are transport related in the Auckland and Northern region. And if you add it up, more than 20% of these are from active transport, pedestrians and pedal cyclists, so they're busily going about their lives, trying to be good citizens and get hit by a vehicle. Well, what's to be done about this? Paradoxically, I don't think it's really to focus on the injuries, but to ask this question: what type of city do we want to live in? And a great example of this is Te Aramua Future Streets over in Mangere. There's a few photos of it here. And recent research has shown that just by making these street changes, we see significant reductions in speeds around these streets, right down from the 50 to 60 mark down to 30 k's, without changing the speed limit, that is. And there's lots of international examples as well. So there's Barcelona's super blocks, which are estimated to increase the life expectancy of the people who lived in those areas by 6 or 7 months. There's London's low traffic neighbourhoods, which reduce pedestrian injuries by 85%. Then there's a great example from Stockholm's City of Cyclists, where they didn't even mention traffic or climate change or anything like that. They just focused on a positive urban vision to increase their cycling infrastructure. Well, I was down in Rotorua recently and saw this sign at our local climbing wall: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It said everything in life, including transport. So I think that if we could smoothly move towards a city where a mum and her daughter could cross the street without being hit by a car, would be in for a good thing. Thanks.
Handing over to Melody, who's online with us now.
Kia ora koutou. We know that physical activity is essential for health, and in fact it's associated with a reduced risk of a number of diseases, as you can see here. Recommendations vary for different population groups, but for adults they sit at around getting 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity, so that's activities that make you huff and puff, every day. So this can be gained through activities like walking and biking. Next slide, please. And importantly, it makes us feel good. So even short bouts of activity, like just walking to go and get a coffee, stimulates the release of a number of hormones and neurotransmitters. And these improve our mood, they help us to focus, and they reduce stress. Next slide. Active transport, or getting around by walking or wheeling, is a physical activity behaviour of particular interest because it brings numerous additional benefits above and beyond physical activity. So if we just think about children getting to school actively, of course, active travel contributes to overall physical activity and the benefits that that brings. But it's also associated with improved learning outcomes and improved behaviour in the classroom, meaning that teachers spend less time trying to settle the classroom. And active transport to school, especially biking, is also independently related to a number of cardiometabolic health outcomes. So that's independent of how much physical activity the children are doing. When children are getting to school independently or without adult supervision, there's a whole lot of developmental benefits as well. And of course, the more children and families we get walking or biking to school, that means less cars on the road. So it brings numerous benefits to the wider community, including reduced congestion and associated reductions in air and noise pollution. But importantly, we also see improvements in social cohesion and connections with nature. Perhaps one of the most important and undervalued benefits of getting kids and families active in younger years is that we know that active transport and physical activity tracks over time at the population level. So supporting active travel earlier in life is going to be associated with both short-term and long-term health gains. Next slide, thanks. However, we spend our lives living in cars. So the New Zealand Household Travel Survey has shown us that Aucklanders spend nearly 7 working weeks per year in cars, 6 3/4 working weeks. Most of our short commutes are done by car, and only half of adults are sufficiently active for health. Compared to the significant benefits of physical activity, car trips of only around 15 minutes or more are directly related to a number of negative personal, social, and work-related outcomes. And I think we've heard a few of those comments earlier today around congestion and stress that causes. The risks are also much broader than this. So car travel is linked with a higher risk of being classified as insufficiently active for health. Prolonged sedentariness, like when sitting in a car, is especially bad for our immediate and long-term health. And insufficient activity is one of the major causes of disease and early death. It leads to around 12% of all early deaths. Next slide, thanks. The great news is that people who use active transport have significantly higher levels of physical activity than those who don't. And importantly, active transport doesn't displace other forms of activity. It has also other health and economic benefits. So estimates suggest that just moving 5% of short urban car trips to cycling in New Zealand would result in 116 fewer deaths through increased physical activity and 6 fewer deaths due to local air pollution from vehicles. And Waka Kotahi's latest monetised benefits and cost manual has shown striking economic benefits. So we have a nearly $10 per kilometre saving for each new walker, and nearly $5 for each new cyclist. Next slide, please. Despite these benefits, we have extremely low rates of active transport in New Zealand and one of the lowest rates of active school travel in the world. We know that people want to get around actively from our research, but the main barrier to this is lack of safety from traffic. In particular, speeding cars make it almost impossible for children to cross roads. They increase crash risk and they increase the risk of serious injury or death. As we've just seen, 3/4 of adults say they would cycle if the roads were safer, and parents consistently tell us that they would allow their child to walk or bike around their neighbourhood only if it was safer from traffic. So overall, the evidence is clear that physical activity is essential for our health and well-being, and active transport plays a significant role in accumulating physical activity while also bringing its own unique benefits. People want to get around actively, but unsafe traffic environments make this almost impossible. Thank you.
Right, so to wrap up, transport is clearly a key contributor to health. We see key opportunities to work together here, that there's a number of things that are within the span and scope of council, which would have benefits for both health and livability, and we'd really love the opportunity to explore these further with the council. So incorporating population health evidence, population health approaches delivers significant health and well-being gains, as has been seen in other health issues like tobacco control. And what we also see is it's not just about health and well-being, but when we address transport, we can address at the same time both air quality, climate change, physical health and well-being, increased social and community cohesion, and there's great value for money and even cost savings to be had. So we'll just leave you with that thought and the request for closer working between the Northern Region, NPHS, Healthy Auckland Together, and involvement in that upstream transport strategy planning and prioritisation processes. Thank you very much.
Kia ora. First question is Mayor Brown. Next question is Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. In a day of strong presentations, another really amazing one with just the kind of evidence that we need. Thank you. And I hope our colleague from the north down the back there was paying attention to the evidence provided. The shift to public transport as a safety benefit is something I'm really interested in. Stacey will be familiar, I've raised this before with Auckland Transport, and how we can potentially put some numbers on that because PT is actually our safest form of transport. Did you have any thinking in that space about how we can articulate that more clearly, the benefit there? And then I've got one follow-up, thanks.
Thank you. That's a good question. I don't have numbers for you, but there has been a lot of work done, including both the safety benefits. Very few people are affected by road crash injuries if they travel by mass transit. And also typically mass transit involves some walking
Yes.
or cycling before and after. And so that is actually a significant and non-trivial contributor to physical activity, which also has health gains.
Thank you. It might be an area for some future study. The other question I had, and I'm sorry, I am focusing a little bit on the trauma side, but want to acknowledge the air pollution stuff, which I think is really significant and often overlooked. One of the things I'm interested in is the, and you mentioned it, I think, in the context of children, Melody, but I'm interested in it in the context of adults and seniors as well, is the impact on independence and confidence of having been in an accident. One of the things we hear about a little bit is people who've had falls on footpaths, to take sort of one end of the spectrum, and I've certainly experienced that myself, having broken some arms, that I am much more careful now in the way that I walk around, the way that I approach stairs outside. And so do we have any data yet? You've got some around children, but I'm really interested in that topic for particularly for seniors, because it's a really big impact on quality of life, that loss of confidence and independence too. Thank you.
I can quickly answer some of that, I think. A lot of the research that we do with older adults suggests, of course, that there is a fear of falling in particular. It's a major barrier to biking as well, and balance concerns. However, what we do find is that people who sort of overcome those fears and get out and use active modes of transport generally thrive from that. What the issue is when, as you've said, Julia, a crash occurs, generally because of an unsafe traffic environment, because the unsafe traffic environment hasn't changed, that's enough of a barrier not to restart that activity. So we have people overcoming those fears already, recognising that the transport environment is suboptimal, but getting out anyway, then being harmed by traffic. And that's enough just to stop them completely. And once those people stop, that's it. There's no coming back. So the only solution to that is to change the environment to support getting back on the bike or getting back walking.
Thanks very much. That's really useful.
Your Worship.
Hi, Alistair. I just wanted what you've raised about the poor air quality, and there's an issue there, I know about that. But I mean, I'm reading here that you got $15.6 billion for the cost of it. That's the size of Fonterra. I mean, economists, sometimes a number like that kind of almost belittles what your message you kind of make, because it's so completely unbelievable. And I mean, you've gone to see an economist, and the economists predicted 9 of the last 3 downturns. And so that's a low credibility area anyhow. I kind of think it's just impossible for me to accept that there's $15.6 billion worth of cost. If there was, during COVID, when nobody drove, was there a $15.6 million improvement in the economy?
No, look, that's a fair point. The reason that we worked with economists to do that was because the government departments that were funding our work required it. And the way we did it was to use the costings that are applied in road safety. So you'd be familiar with the value of a statistical life. So that, in fact, that number has actually been almost doubled recently. The figures I gave you were with a cheaper or a lower value of a statistical life. So the up-to-date number is even bigger than that. So that's the explanation for the $15 billion. Is it helpful or not? Well, I would, take guidance from you and from other people who have to make decisions. But we were asked to estimate as best we could, the dollars and cents impact of air pollution, and that was what we did. That was the best way of doing it.
Yeah, but what happens is the economists count up all of the medical things from all those things together and add them up. And if you go around and add up all of the things that come in from those government reports, you'll find that they're underestimating the size of the New Zealand economy by about a times of 100, because they all add up to way bigger figures. But when you look at it, it's the same size as Fonterra. I find it hard to believe. I'm not suggesting that it isn't good, but I don't think those things help you. And if for instance, it was, so, because then I ask, okay, we have a downturn, where is the saving? And it doesn't appear, so that kind of makes that look a bit bad. Again, if it was so bad, if it's such a bad thing, do you have a demonstration that people are incredibly much more healthy when they live out in rural areas where there isn't vehicle pollution? Are they $10 billion healthier, or is it $5 billion healthier, or are they not necessarily healthier? Because if you're going to claim one thing, then they have to be subjected to some prick like me coming along and asking a lot of questions because to find is that reasonable or not. So how much better off are people who don't live in polluted areas?
Well, I think it's a fair question. I mean, the sort of study I've just described to you is an observational study relating air pollution and health. What happens if you improve air quality? Now, we don't really have good studies in New Zealand to refer to, but there are some interesting natural experiments overseas. You might remember the Beijing Olympics, you know, when the Chinese government shut down factories and traffic and so on, and the air quality improved enormously for the period of the Olympics, and then the factories went back online and air quality deteriorated. So there was some good work doing tracking the population of Beijing, including a really interesting study on taxi drivers. It was commented before that the inside of cars is the worst place to be in terms of exposure to air pollution. And there was clear evidence that people's health improved when air quality improved.
Oh, I don't doubt that for a moment. I think that you're onto something rather there, but I think when you shove huge, unbelievable numbers to it, it kind of denigrates the argument, and then to say that we don't have a study that shows perhaps the people who live in central Otago, where there's bugger all people and wonderful air, are they particularly healthier than the people who live in the building you and I live in?
Sorry, I didn't understand. I didn't answer your last point. Yes, no, there's clear evidence that people who live in parts of New Zealand where the air is better have better health.
Well, that's good. That should give you a place to do a real comparison and come up with a number which is more believable. Okay, thanks for that, Alistair.
Thank you. Our speaking order is Councillor Henderson, Councillor Hills, Councillor Darby, and I will close it off there.
Thank you, Chair. Look, we're seeing a change in emphasis, rhetoric and funding from central government away from safety initiatives, active modes and the like. How are you working with government on sharing this amazing and important data, which is so relevant and important for the country?
Well, I've recently moved from a regional-only public health unit to part of Te Whatu Ora National Public Health Service. So, yes, the national picture is really important to us. I think I would stress two things on that yes, these conversations are being had by my colleagues at a national level and feeding into transport policy there. But there are also things that really lie at local government level as well that we can do that make a difference. And there's things that need to happen at the community level as well. So it's definitely taking the whole comprehensive approach to that I'm keen to be a part of.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. My first question goes to Councillor Henderson's question. We've got, maybe it was due to COVID, maybe it was due to online connection. The last 4 years especially, I've seen quite a significant rise in not believing evidence, not believing science. We've got a government who's just announced they want more smokers to pay for tax cuts. How do you see us as leaders trying to get through that? When you put the evidence in front of us that this equals more deaths, worse lives, less money in the economy, more people coming through your surgeries and waiting rooms, do you have any advice for us how to connect up our decisions to actual evidence? climate change, etc. Feel free to not say anything or go hard. I've read a lot of the work some of you have done, which talks about some of this.
I'm happy to have a go there. Yes, obviously, there's a concern with the loss of trust in science. I think also New Zealand has been, to a certain degree, spared that. But I also think that bringing science into the public forum is a key part of that, and also the way we discuss it openly, critique it, and that it is seen as part of good public policy and decision making, and the way we the discourse around it in terms of holding to the same set of facts, but maybe looking for differences in the way we implement or differences in interpretation around the values of that, but looking to hold to the same set of facts, I think is a key value of a really functioning democracy.
And I guess maybe do any of you have any real concerns that maybe councils aren't looking, or decision makers in our position aren't looking to the whole social costs? So often it's, well, what's the income to council? I hear quite a lot, but the taxpayer and the ratepayer are the same people. So the funding that goes into health being spent on, I can give you one slight example. Queen Street in our State of the Environment report was one of the worst air quality in the whole city. So it was obviously reduced cars, put electric buses in there, added trees and walking, and hopefully that'll add to health outcomes. But some of the pushback at the time was that doesn't affect our budget.
Definitely agree, and I think that is part of why we need to be working as a system as a whole, because benefits from air quality improvements will accrue over a long period of time and make big differences, both for children but also for chronic disease. And that's going to be benefits that are largely seen through health system costs. But we need that whole system well-being approach where we're recognising that you can't just think that health funding is for health and that council funding sort of stops and it's just about roads and rates. But actually there is going to be costs that are paid in one part that will release huge savings for us as a society, but through some of our accounting practices may be seen to be very disparate.
Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for bringing us this rather frank evidence, as uncomfortable as it may be for some. It's really good to have this. Can I just ask you, how do you, Te Whatu Ora, how does it plug in to groups at maybe convened by Waka Kotahi or Auckland Transport, working with other agencies, with Manatu Hauora, I think the name is, and others, might be ACC, to gel the evidence together, to glue it together, so that those of us in governance positions, have got this go-to source. Now, I understand there's the Tamaki Makaurau Road Safety Governance Group. I'm assuming that your body sits on that. Now, they're more focused on I think, the safety side. Do they extend into the well-being side enough?
So yes, we are involved there, and I think that that's the kind of example of things that are needed in terms of this. Everyone who's got some of the levers of control, some of the evidence, some of the part to play, because these are complicated issues. So that's one around safety. I think that kind of approach could really be extended further than just safety into other aspects of transport. Another key part of my role, for example, is around nutrition and looking at food environments and how many different parts, including council, have a role there. One that I'd like to highlight, though, for the transport sector is this. We have a interagency collective, Healthy Auckland Together, that we've alluded to, which Council and Auckland Transport are both parts of. We have Waka Kotahi, Kainga Ora, a number of the academic groups, mana whenua, who gather around, and we have a healthy transport working group which come together as sort of a group with this kind of view, values, to try and contribute to good, healthy transport policy and strategy. So there is some of those networks emerging, but I think lifting the level of those and making sure that we're connected across, because I know from health as being a really big organisation where you can have different views, there is that same sort of thing, I think, across the council bureaucracy, where we might be really closely working with one part, and then perhaps REMU or some other part, the Sustainability Office, doesn't even have any awareness of that kind of commonality. So, yeah, keen to see that increase.
Yeah, that would be good, because I think that's the missing link at the moment, because, I mean, I'm familiar with some of this work, and you're here again today. This is not the first time you've talked about this. And I'm just a bit concerned that we're not pulling all the threads together to tell the whole story. Like yesterday, and if I could just for a draft budget, we extinguished the Access for Everyone budget of 49 million over the next 10 years. We know that there is a lot of black carbon in the lower city centre. That budget would have partially addressed that problem. But in making that decision, there was no information that the health implications of our decision making were not on our minds, nowhere. So I'm looking for ways of actually bringing that information to our report. And I think we're missing something in our structure at the moment. Sorry, Chair, I'm taking a bit of time.
Thank you. I'd like to bring this to a conclusion. In saying that, I think I've declined Councillor Newman and others, so Yes, I realise that. I want to, in thanking you for coming before us, say that I do believe science and public forum is actually really important, and there are other areas of council, parks for instance. I'd love to spend time understanding in a scientific way the importance of council's investments in a whole range of things. But I do want to give you one last opportunity if there's anything that hasn't been presented to us. And before you do, say that Leanne Dalziel and I had the privilege of attending the first United Nations conference in Beijing in 1994, the International Women's Conference. And that was the first time they had ever closed down the entire city of Beijing. So there was also work that was undertaken at that stage. We couldn't sort of believe it, but the impact on the environment was just extraordinary, having been there and been present for that. But anything in conclusion before we thank you?
If I may just pick up on Councillor Darby's point, that I think that that's very much the purpose of us coming here, is we recognise there's some key areas where there's good relationships and that information going from public health to council, but I think to raise the visibility and look to extend that further. When we first started Healthy Auckland together in 2015, it was quite closely connected in social and community policy and sports parks and recreation. Currently, lots of ties around transport, but I think right throughout the organisation there are a number of parallels where population health expertise can really be useful to addressing some of the issues, and we'd really welcome right across the organisation the ability to connect further.
Thank you for your advocacy, and thank you, Melody, for joining us online. Thank you. It's open now for some discussion, and on... Sorry? Oh, just thinking. Yeah, no, that's fine. Sorry, I'm given guidance on that, but I'm going to move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Newman, you wanted to speak at this time? Apologies. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. Yeah, look, I'm just pointing out there's a really welcome theme today, and that's the theme of climate change. It's actually really heartening that we're having really serious and confronting discussions about this today. I'd add something to the presentation as well, that these issues of air quality are not just purely transport issues. They're also housing issues. They're also planning issues. And I've been talking about that for a long time. But I'd suggest that suburban Aucklanders are really getting the brunt of all of these negative outcomes. And what's more, they're spending hours of their week away from their families sitting in traffic. And the data plays that out in places like Howick and places like Waitakere, Rodney, Franklin, you name it. These are the situations where people are not spending enough time with their kids because they're busy commuting. I'm concerned that despite what we've heard today, we're going backwards in terms of the work required to actually meet the challenges that have been set out. And at a minimum, I think we should be very clear as a council that we need to ask the government to reverse the rhetoric around raising speeds, driving down investments into active transport, and instead go with what the actual evidence is telling us, and it's been telling us all day. We need to take roles as community leaders in spreading that evidence and continuing that conversation among our communities so they're getting the actual facts here. Throughout history, we've seen disinformation campaigns around, these just come to the top of my head, around smoking, around secondhand smoke, around the ozone hole, around acid rain, around climate change itself, most famously. All of these attempts through history have eventually failed. Now we need to listen to the evidence on climate safety and air quality, because I fear there's another battle coming with the rhetoric that we're hearing in the public around this stuff. So we need to recommit and reaffirm the truth that we've heard today. But this isn't just a government thing. This is, I mean, rightly this was pointed out to me in my question. For us as a council, we need to lead directly. And some of the stuff we've already done, you know, we're not needing to reinvent the wheel here. Queen Street was once or maybe it still is, but it was once the black carbon capital of the country, right? We've done so much good work there with Te Kamititanga and all the rest into fantastic community spaces now, right? That people enjoy, and it's always full. People are loving it. People bring their kids from all over the city for these places, right? What was previously the air quality capital of the country. So we have a huge role to lead, but I would just end with this, that you know, we're not running around looking for places to put speed tables. They're often requested by communities and particularly schools, right? So when schools ask us for slow speeds around their areas, we should act. When we see bus routes proposed for cuts, and that was what we talked about yesterday, we should act to save them. That's all our responsibility, and it's all in our hands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak in support of the recommendations there. I think it's awesome that we have these medical professionals come and talk health and talk transport. So I see Michael Roth was the author of the report. So thank you, Michael, for your work. And I look forward to continual working together and having this population health perspective on transport strategy, not only, you know, the climate side, but also the health side. I saw this when I asked the TERP team to come out with me to Otara to the South Seas vaccination event, because I could see it, you know, the impacts on someone's health, and we know how our Pasifika people feature pretty badly in health statistics, and being active and, you know, getting out of the car and walking, and then, you know, you're also reducing your emissions. But the connection is there, and it's just awesome to see this come through from that perspective of how it's going to actually help people and keep them out of hospitals. And yeah, I hope it can be mobilised into communities, into Pacific communities, because right now our health workers are all focused on the, you know, like it's too far gone. It's the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, whereas I see a lot of this working in the prevention space. And yeah, I just think it's awesome. I'm really glad to see them here and thank them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferry, and do we have any speakers opposed to the recommendations? I missed it. I'm sorry. Sorry, Councillor, you're actually after Councillor Bartley. Apologies. But if you will indulge me, we'll take Councillor Ferry and then Councillor Turner. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to speak in favour as well. I really appreciate having in front of us today such expertise, academic as well as medical, and the interaction of those two. And I wanted to particularly acknowledge that I think it was James is actually a paediatric surgeon, and he has taken the time out from really important work to make a plea to us today. And I just wanted to particularly acknowledge that, having had a child through Starship. The evidence base for this stuff is just, I just so agree with what Councillor Henderson said. It's incontrovertible, and it is frustrating that we do seem to see some of this as debatable, as opposed to, okay, this is what it is, what do we do next? And I did just want to pick up on a point which Councillor Bartley started along that line as well, of the equity impacts of a lot of this, is that a lot of the people who are already worse off are more severely impacted by some of this stuff. I'm thinking about the fact that we have parts of our population who literally die earlier, and these kinds of things, living in communities where they have public transport deserts, where they can't walk or cycle safely, they can't necessarily access healthy food or facilities. All of this stuff mounts up and has a real toll, and we have a responsibility to act to produce more equitable outcomes across the city. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you. So what? Or maybe the word should be so when. So when are we going to actually do something? I have sent everybody a report of pages of 4 vehicles driving around behind 1 man picking up rubbish, of our slip material being trucked right across the city and then trucked down to Hampton Downs and up to Waimalku. We have got food scraps being taken all the way to Reparoa. When are we going to join the dots together and actually do something? I've sent people some photos of premises out in the Waitakeris with 7 air conditioning units on top of them. We sit here and we soak ourselves in the wokeness. No, it's not. That's, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say the. I was going to say the ideology.
Statement of intent.
Order. Councillor Turner is speaking. Please be respectful.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be serious about it. I as a tradie, I see the argument, I see the evidence, but I don't see any practical outcome. And it just starts with the stuff we can change, and we work up from there. I don't see it, and I think it's time. We have a huge conflict between our health and safety, and that's like these 4 vehicles following around 1 man picking up rubbish, and our desire to reduce our emissions and the environmental outcomes of our actions. We need to get some policy together and get some matrix that work that we can apply to ourselves. Thank you.
I'm going to take Councillor Hills, and then I'm going to invite Barry Potter to help us understand how we are going to weave what I think is really important information into our transport strategy on our ongoing program. Councillor Hills, time, haven't got it.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, and thank you as Chair for allowing all these presentations today, which are linking up together and giving us clear evidence. Thank you to the presentation from our health professionals. I think it's so important to have that evidence. And I received an email yesterday from doctors at Auckland Hospital who are looking for a march to protect the smoke-free legislation, because they say that those changes to fund tax cuts will mean more deaths and will mean more costs to the health system. What was presented here today is a clear outline of reducing emissions, reducing deaths of kids, that the kids came and spoke to us today. So if Councillor Newman wants to say protecting kids is wokeness, or reducing air quality, poor air quality as wokeness, and trying to act on climate change as wokeness, well then maybe that's what it is. But actually I want to focus on the evidence, and Councillor Turner, I'm keen to work with you on those things, but we're all elected here and we can get those things done. We just have to show leadership and ensure we get them done. But it is about systems change. It is about ensuring we back up our decisions of the past. Dr. Hale had wrote in 2020 that he was impressed by Auckland Council and not only our climate plan, but also the lower speeds that we're going to save lives based on evidence. Obviously, our budget is all about prioritisation, and all I'm asking is that we use evidence, like we heard today, like that we get presented to us from officers, around how we make sure Aucklanders, from no matter where they are in the city, are safer, are healthier, have a better life, and that we also plan for the next generation. Because the presentations we've had here today have been chilling and phenomenal, but I think if we continue to ignore them and have the wry smiles and kind of put out there that don't worry, the government's going to come in and crash everything down, well, I don't think the government wants to do that. I think there'll be difference of opinions, but I hope they work with us based on evidence, because I know our community expects us to do so. Kia ora.
Councillor Newman.
It's been interesting listening to the presentations today, because I think that everybody has come here with their passions, their evidence and their arguments, and I thank everybody for that. The challenge that I have actually is around this place, because what's the very first thing that we have to do, Chair? Well, we actually have to pass a budget to do something, to fund something. And it's remarkable how some people can pass a budget and other people cannot. The second thing in the transport space is that we have to enable Auckland Transport to do something by passing a statement of intent. Some of us can do that, others cannot. I respectfully am very interested to know how those people who have struggled to appropriate and have struggled to pass a statement of intent to allow Auckland Transport to enable the interventions, however good, bad or indifferent, and it's always going to be a value judgment, how they're going to enable Auckland Transport to do that if they're just going to sit here in meetings and give very interesting speeches but actually not pass a statement of intent. Chair, what will be interesting with Auckland Transport is to understand from them, and we will hear from them soon, the extent to which the budget changes that we have made previously enable them to follow the evidence and to make the interventions in favour of traffic safety and to allow for a mode shift. Actually, it's been this council that on too many occasions has actually said to Auckland Transport at the last moment, well, actually, we're going to have to take funding from this initiative that's going to address mode shift and accelerated switching from vehicles to active transport in new growth areas and outer suburban Auckland. We're going to take funding away from that in order to fund favoured housing projects elsewhere. So I get very infuriated, Chair, when I get lectured about things that people perceive me to value and not value, when in fact I've seen transport activities compromised in my ward because of decisions taken around this table to reallocate safety budgets and accelerated mode shift budgets away from growth areas and outer suburban Auckland because they are deemed not to be favourable. Thank you.
Councillor Newman, were you speaking for or against the motion?
Madam Chair, this is about receiving a presentation. What we've had in this debate is a proxy for other things that we're going to talk about, and I wanted to respond to some of that.
Thank you. I'm going to invite, at this point, Barry Potter as our lead officer to help us understand how, in light of the presentation that we've had from a number of very, I think, critical professionals who've given up their time to make a presentation to us today, and I would like to take the politics out of this and understand better how we can incorporate this into our ongoing work program for this committee.
Thank you, Chair. And look, just if I might speak very briefly, there's been some real, the view I've heard is a strong desire to hear a more broad range of evidence that comes into our decision making, and particularly around the health, around safety, around well-being, ensuring that when we're looking at transportation projects, programs and the future, that evidence is brought to councillors in their decision making. That's something that we will pick up with Auckland Transport, with our council strategy team, and working with Wakatahi as well, to ensure that that evidence comes as part of your consideration when you're making decisions.
Thank you.
Well, listen,
Chair,
please,
Chair,
Councillor Darby, I'm speaking.
Okay,
I was going to take a question.
I'll speak after you speak.
I find your behaviour really disrespectful to me as chair. I'd ask you to withdraw and just allow me. I haven't asked one single question today. Could you please show me some respect? Mr. Potter, could you help me understand how this, I mean, one of the key bodies of work that this committee has the delegations for, how this will be factored into the work that we're doing around an integrated transport plan?
That's very much the basis of this, is that transportation plan has a broader consideration of the things we've just covered off here, that these are brought into it, and that was what I was alluding to in when talking about in our planning. This comes to that the broader health issues and the broader health evidence is brought to that consideration and to the input into that planning process for that integrated plan.
Thank you. That doesn't require a resolution. We can just trust that that will be work that is undertaken. Thank you for that. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Barry, it's clear, and I thank you for your response, and that the reporting coming through needs to be a bit more denser in terms of, what is the impact of the decision that might be taken on the safety of the transport system, or, the health and wellbeing implications. Considering a number of the submissions here today, including the most recent, relate to that area of, a safe transport system, can we say for February, I wouldn't suggest prior, at this committee, could you arrange for Auckland Transport, and possibly with Wakatahi, but probably led by Auckland Transport, to come into the next Transport Infrastructure Committee meeting to address the work, the most recent work they've been doing on safety? I mean, I'm privy to that as a board member, but there is considerable work in that area. It's topical at the moment, going by all the submissions we've heard today. Can we confirm that for February, please?
I think we surely can, and I think there'd be good support for that, but I'll have a talk to the CE. And do you want to speak to it?
I think what I had planned to do is, obviously this work is underway and it feeds into work that is ongoing, and you have the opportunity to hear from Auckland Transport this afternoon if we can ever conclude this item on the agenda. To that end,
I'm actually talking about a specific strategic thinking session on it, rather than just a report.
I would like, again with respect, Councillor Darby, for us to be able to deal with that at the appropriate time. At this time, I would like to move the recommendations that are before you, that have been moved and seconded by Councillor Henderson. I'm going to put them. All those in favour say aye. To the contrary say no. The matter is...
Aye.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. We now adjourn for lunch, and we will resume at 2 o'clock. Thank you.